Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Anna Adamson. I'm a project associate at Clean Energy Group. The topic for today's webinar is Building a Resilient Workforce, the Detroit Clean Energy Contractor Accelerator program. This webinar is presented by Clean Energy Group as a part of our Resilient Power project. Before we go any further, let us go through a couple quick webinar logistics. You'll notice you have a webinar console, which should look like the picture that's shown on the screen here. You can use the console to adjust your audio. Either you can listen from your computer's microphone or you can join via telephone. All of our attendees are in listen-only mode. Near the bottom of the console, you'll see there's a box where you can write and submit your questions to us. We will reserve some time at the end of today's webinar to be able to have a Q&A session with you all. Make sure you submit questions as you think of them. Do not wait until the end of the webinar to submit your questions, please. If you would like to view the speaker's presentation in full screen mode, you can do so by minimizing the webinar console. All you have to do is click the orange arrow, which is on the left-hand side of the webinar console. Click that arrow again to expand the console afterwards. One final note, this webinar is being recorded and you'll get a recording of the webinar as well as the presentation slides sent to your email just a little bit after today's webinar within a day or two. You can also find that information on our website, cleanegroup.com/webinars. That's a good URL to know because that is also where we post all of our upcoming webinars and other exciting information. So with that, I will pass it over to Marielle Mango, who is a project director at Clean Energy Group and is moderating today's webinar.
Hi everyone, I'm Marielle Mango. We're just going to go through a quick overview of who we are here at CEG. Clean Energy Group works at the forefront of clean energy innovation to accelerate an equitable and inclusive transition to a resilient, sustainable clean energy future. We work in multiple buckets of projects, including policy, program development, coalition building, and awareness building. And I encourage everyone to check out our new website. It looks great. Next slide, please. Today's webinar is brought to you by the Resilient Power Project. The Resilient Power Project focuses pretty exclusively on building access to solar and battery storage technologies in historically underserved and marginalized communities. You can see a couple of the reports that we published here. Increasingly, the Resilient Power Project is working at the intersection of health, equity, and resilient power, and how clean energy can support public health in the event of an emergency, as well as during regular operations, as well as support the grid. Today, our webinar will be focusing on how job training opportunities and workforce development are integrated into resilient power, and these are all topics that we explore through the RPP program. Today's a little bit of an example of the different types of projects that we support across the country. We work a lot with one-on-one with organizations through our Technical Assistance Fund, and this is just a great example of the types of projects we support, both through small grant funding to conduct a solar and storage assessment, as well as just through one-on-one support and talking folks through the resilient power process. And then just a plug for our Technical Assistance Fund. CEG provides technical assistance support to really any critical community facility as defined by the community. So we've worked with institutions of faith, municipalities, food pantries, affordable housing, really any nonprofit institutions, really any institute that provides invaluable services to low-income communities or communities of color in the event of a power outage. And typically the TAF provides one-on-one support from our expert staff, as well as small grant funding to actually conduct a solar and storage assessment with a third-party engineer, which will result in a comprehensive report of how solar and storage can benefit your facility. We've awarded over $1 million in funding over the past 10 years to conduct these assessments. And we've worked with, it's actually 28 states, as well as DC and Puerto Rico, as well as tribal governments. And the program is expanding nationwide as more and more folks realize the benefits of solar and storage and are impacted by power outage, specifically related to natural disasters. So this is just a breakdown of that. If you're interested in applying, grants are typically $5,000 to $15,000. They average about $9 grand. And they're really meant to, again, support an engineer to actually get in there and conduct a solar and storage feasibility on your facility. And luckily enough today, we'll be hearing from some great engineers and organizations that are actually working on training folks to be involved in clean energy workforce development and assessments. This is also another program we offer called the Resilient Power Initiative. It's a much smaller program, typically only offered to 2 to 3 organizations a year that supports capacity building. It's a $10,000 grant and one-on-one support from CEG for a year to be able just to work on building your internal CBO's capacity to address whatever the resiliency needs of your community may be. And if you're interested in that, I suggest you reach out to learn more. Great, so on to the webinar speakers today. We have a great cohort of folks. I'm gonna give some quick bios, starting with Ricky Ackerman. Ricky is the Chief Sustainability Officer of Eastside Community Network. He has been at Eastside Community Network since February 2018 and currently serves as the Chief Sustainability Officer. While at ECN, Ricky has implemented green stormwater infrastructure projects, supported the creation of a resident sustainability fellowship program, and regularly engaged with community members around climate equity-focused topics. Currently, he's working with ECN's climate equity team to build power and amplify voices among residents on Detroit's East Side, while also engaging across the organization to center sustainability in all of ECN's organizational practices. Prior to starting at ECN, he received his master's in environmental policy from the University of Michigan School of Natural Resources and Environment. Next up, we'll have Elizabeth Wallace. She is a senior program manager of municipal and community at Elevate. Elizabeth is the senior program manager on the Elevate's Michigan team. In this Detroit-based role, Elizabeth manages and supports Elevate's projects in Detroit and Michigan, including the City of Detroit's climate strategy and Ann Arbor's Home Energy Advisor program. She builds Elevate's relationships with local partners, leads project implementation, and supports strategic planning in Michigan. Prior to joining Elevate, Elizabeth worked with the City of Detroit's Office of Sustainability and World Wildlife Fund's climate team on the Science-Based Targets Initiative, completed graduate research on utility affordability in Detroit and renewable energy policy in Michigan, and worked in management consulting at Deloitte Consulting with a focus on the future of mobility and smart cities. Elizabeth holds an MBA, MS in environmental justice and environmental policy and planning, and a BBA in Spanish language and literature from University of Michigan. Joining her is Tim Skrotsky. He's the Associate Director of Strategic Consulting for Elevate. In this role, he leads Elevate's strategic engagement team throughout the Midwest by designing and delivering sustainable and equitable clean energy programs customized to lift disadvantaged communities. He has worked to successfully fundraise over $1 million to develop a network of resilience hubs in Detroit, along with a clean energy. Publications include Evaluating Energy Burden for Low-Income Families in Michigan and the Detroit Solar Kit, consisting of equity-based policy, design guidelines, and deployment strategies for solar in Detroit. Tim is a graduate of the Great Lakes Leadership Academy. He has an MBA with a focus on sustainable real estate development from Portland State University and a BS from the University of Iowa. Nate Mills is a program manager and leadership expert with over 2 decades of experience leading technically complex engineering efforts from design through construction. He's currently working at American Microgrid Solutions as Vice President of Operations. A former Navy officer, Nate holds a Naval Engineer's degree and an MS in Mechanical Engineering from MIT, an MS in Earth and Planetary Sciences from the University of New Mexico, and a BS in Geology from Cornell University. Finally, we have Karanja Famadu. Karanja is the impact-driven strategic operations and growth-oriented clean energy executive. He's at Ryter Cooperative Industries as the Chief Operating Officer. He successfully leads large and small, direct and cross-functional teams spanning a variety of disciplines, products, solutions and innovation, marketing, regional and local client delivery of implementation services, corporate and operational finance, and highly specialized and scaled delivery teams with national scope. A graduate of Wayne State University, Karanja holds a BS degree in technical education. He has also completed graduate coursework in international administration. When he isn't leading Ryter Cooperative Industries operations, Karanja enjoys being with his family, traveling and lending a helping hand to pollinators as a volunteer beekeeper at D-Town Farm. So as you can see, we have an awesome array of folks. I hope I did their bios justice, and I will hand it over to Ricky to get us started.
All right, thanks. So as she said, my name is Ricky Ackerman, and I work at Eastside Community Network in Detroit. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about how the Resilient Eastside Initiative, as we call it, came about. And just to start, I want to talk a little bit about Eastside Community Network. So we're a CDC, a community development corporation that is on the east side of Detroit. We are formed back in 1984 by residents who were wanting to organize and have more influence in the developments they were starting to see in their neighborhoods. So it was a form of sort of building power and organizing in order to lift their voices and exert their power and influence. And that's what we continue to do as an organization. We're still very resident centered. They make up the largest portion of our board of directors. We have a lot of committees that are led by residents, and so that they're really at the center of everything we're doing. And we're still organizing, learning together, and working to influence both through direct implementation and policy advocacy. And one of the things that we were doing, for about, this is going back to like 2010, is we were doing a lot of work around green stormwater infrastructure, that we saw issues with flooding in our neighborhoods. That's street flooding, basement flooding. In 2014, there was a large scale flooding event. And so those had all influenced us to start looking at stormwater solutions that used more nature-based practices. And then that eventually led us, when I joined the organization in 2018, to start to look at the impacts of climate change on Detroit, and specifically on the east side neighborhoods where we serve. All the neighborhoods we serve are majority Black. They've seen a lot of disinvestment in the last several decades. So that means disinvestment in water infrastructure, in energy infrastructure, in roads, in housing. There was a lot of demolitions going on. There's a foreclosure crisis throughout Detroit, where a lot of people lost their homes. Those sat vacant, and then eventually the city or other entities demolished them. So there was just a lot of vacancy. But as we started learning about how climate change was going to increase impacts around rain events and potentially cause more flooding, increase the risk of extreme heat events, it got us thinking about how no one was really talking about climate change on the east side of Detroit, and we needed to enter this into the conversation more. And the other influence that was sort of going on then was we were connected through the Institute for Sustainable Communities to a group in Baltimore called Power 52. And they were starting to develop these resilience hubs in Baltimore. And that sort of gave us ideas for starting to think around this. And so we own a fairly large building. It was a former medical office that was donated to us. And it got us thinking about turning that into a resilience hub, and how we could offer space for people in those times of crisis, thinking of extreme heat, extreme rain events. The other thing stemming from disinvestment in our energy system is power outages. Those are pretty regular here. Sometimes it takes several days for people to get reconnected. So these are all issues that we're dealing with as a community, alongside environmental injustices that cause respiratory issues through air pollution, water contamination, a variety of problems. And then just to speak to the sort of evolution of our vision as an organization, the pandemic hit. So as we were starting to already orient towards this, and we formed our partnership with Elevate, who's been advising us on sort of the infrastructure side of how do we develop these spaces so that they're energy resilient and have everything we need to serve the community. The pandemic hit. And one of our CEO's good friends and a tremendous community leader, Marlo Staudemeyer, he passed away from COVID fairly early on into the pandemic. And it got us rethinking about how we could serve the community with the space we have. And we had some tenants in our building, but they had to reduce their size and then eventually leave because they could no longer sustain because of the impacts of the pandemic. But it gave us opportunity to revision how we use the space. And so that's when we started thinking beyond just resilience and response to the weather events, but thinking holistically around wellness, and how can we best help facilitate wellness in our community. And this was a lot of conversations with community members. We're connected to a lot of block clubs, neighborhood associations, and we're having regular discussions about this and how the space could best serve all of them. And so that's when we started and we developed the idea of the Stoudemire Wellness Hub, so wellness and resilience hub. So that's looking at healthcare access, healing from trauma, not just giving resources, but actually having those work groups, technology literacy, fitness. How can we sort of tackle all these different dimensions of wellness and not just physical or housing, but make it all connected together. And I think the other aspect of this that's important to note is we just saw how unprepared our city was for climate change and for any emergent, like wide-scale emergencies. And that really hit home in June 2021, where we experienced what our utilities and the city officials were calling an unprecedented flooding event, where over 30,000 homes experienced flooding in the city of Detroit. And that's the majority of those were basement backups, where it wasn't water coming in through cracks or seepage. It was through the basement sewers backing up, so people had sewage in their basements. We weren't quite ready. We had actually been mostly work from home for a while because of escalations in the pandemic, but we immediately opened our office in response to this event and started serving the community. So we were giving out cleanup kits, we were hiring crews to go in and clean out debris in people's basements. And then a lot of time too, just walking residents through the different forms, because there was FEMA claims, there was claims with our utility, and trying to help them deal with all of that sort of red tape and the assembling documents and whatnot. But I think one thing that was highlighted through that was just how important the social connectedness was in these different neighborhoods that were then connecting to us, that people were leaning on their neighbors, they were leaning on their family, their friends, and a lot of neighbors would come to us, and then they'd be bringing other people from their neighborhood in to get connected to us, and so we could help them as well. And so part of how we were seeing things, and some of this was with our partnership with Elevate and the city of Detroit too, who came to us wanting to develop resilience hubs of their own, was that we really need a network of hubs across the east side, across Detroit. So how can we envision not just our space, but a connected network of spaces that can serve people throughout the neighborhood, so that everyone has one within a short distance. And so that's what we're now working on, and Elizabeth's going to dive a little bit more into that, is developing a network. And what we really want to do is support go to places where that social connectedness already exists, where these small community groups are already developing spaces, and lift them up, give them resources so they can start building out their space and better serve their community on a day-to-day basis, but also in times of crisis. And just to note, like, where we're at with the Stoudemire Wellness and Resilience Hub is this unit we opened in 2021, and we now have a member base of 875. We have 25 to 30 programs each week, and that includes things like ballroom dancing, Zumba, hustle, and other fitness-oriented classes. We have podcasting classes and like computer classes to help people connect to technology. We have pottery, sewing, other art classes. We have a whole swath of youth programming. There's cooking, there's movie nights, all sorts of things. And our CEO is even teaching a class around racial equity. So, and we're currently planning coursework around advocacy skills. So to help people make public comments at city meetings or submit comments on permits, things like that. But we're just trying to make it a center of empowerment where we can help build power in community groups and residents. And we're just continuing to expand that vision. And so now I'll pass it to Elizabeth to dig a little bit more into the Resilient Eastside Initiative.
Thanks, Ricky. And thanks, team, for sharing the slides here. We can go on to the next slide. So hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth Wallace. I'm the Senior Program Manager for our Michigan team here at Elevate. So before diving into some of the context on the Resilience Hub, the Resilience Hubs we're working on through the Resilient Eastside Initiative in partnership with Eastside Community Network. I want to give a little background on Elevate and our organization. Elevate is a nonprofit that seeks to create a just and equitable world where everyone has access to clean and affordable heat, power, and water in their homes and communities, no matter who they are or where they live. So we look at making the benefits and services of the clean energy economy accessible to everyone. Big focus of our work there. Next slide. Okay, so with the Resilient Eastside Initiative that we are working on in partnership with Ricky and his colleague Megan Richards at Eastside Community Network, we're focusing on a project related to resilience hubs. And before diving into that, I wanted to give a quick overview of resilience hubs and how we're starting to think about them. We're at a planning point of the process of the project, so we're in the process of defining exactly what this means in the community and engaging with residents and community organizations. But from the start, what we're looking at in resilience hubs, a lot of times you'll think about a resilient structure, so making sure that the building itself is able to operate in times of emergency with structurally with solar and battery storage, particularly so it's able to operate in times of power outages. Also during other emergencies such as flooding that Ricky mentioned as well. So we also think about the emergency services that a resilience hub can provide. This could be heating and cooling in times of extreme heat or cold. It can be a space to distribute supplies in other emergencies such as power outages or flooding. In a power outage, a resilience hub can store medicines or provide emergency power for medical devices or charging for critical devices in the community. It is a safe and secure and accessible space that can be accessed in these times of emergencies. We're also thinking about resilience hubs beyond just the times of emergencies, but also how do they connect in the community with residents. So part of that is looking at engagement and communication. So it's really important. It's great if the resilience hubs are operating in this time of emergency, but how do residents know about these organizations and how do they know what's available in a time of emergency, and also how are they connected on a day-to-day basis. We're also looking at communications of notifying residents of emergencies if there's flooding and folks don't know that people's basements might be compromised. That's an example of one of the ways of communication that we're looking at as well. And as Ricky mentioned, the way that we're looking at this is organizations that are connected in the community on a day-to-day basis. So this last piece of programmatic services is looking at the everyday services that are provided across the network that we're looking at building of resilience hubs. So the organizations that we are working with all have different focuses, and we're looking at lifting up the services that each of the organizations provides and connecting them across the network so that residents across the neighborhood on the east side of Detroit can have access to these services. Next slide, please. So here you can see kind of a map view of the east side of Detroit. You can see several of our initial organizations that we are considering partnering with for the Resilience Hub network. Across here, they're marked in the little blue markers on the screen here. So you can see that the idea is that these organizations are spread across the neighborhood so that they're accessible to residents across different neighborhoods within the east side of the city. And you can see three of the hubs that we're going to dive into a little bit deeper called out here. The Lennox Center on the left side of the screen is a city rec center, the Stoudemire Wellness Hub that Ricky dove into here kind of in the middle, and then on the right side is the Brilliant Detroit Chandler Park House. Next slide, please. All right, so I want to give a little highlight into the group of partners that we have as part of the Resilient Eastside Initiative. So Eastside Community Network, Ricky and Megan over there are really leading the charge on this vision and connecting with organizations in the community. And then our team at Elevate is a close partner, and we're bringing some of the technical expertise and supporting on planning initiatives and coordinating with the city. And then, of course, the city of Detroit is another really important partner in terms of understanding what the city is doing in times of emergency, and then looking at how the city can connect with these organizations in the community. We have a couple additional technical partners, American Microgrid Solutions and Ryter Cooperative Industries. They'll speak a little bit later on this call. And then this would not be possible without all of the fantastic community-based organizations that are going to be or are in some ways already acting as resilience hubs and part of this network. So one of our early partners is Resilient Detroit. They are a nonprofit focused on early childhood development in the city. And we are right now in the process of meeting with 8 to 12 additional nonprofits on the east side that will be supporting us in the development of the network and the kind of initial resilience hubs. And then we will be also coordinating with a lot of different departments and agencies within the City of Detroit's government system. So there's the General Services Department, the Department of Homeland Security, there's a Community Health Corps here, and the Parks and Rec Department, the Health Department, the Housing and Revitalization Department, and the Department of Neighborhoods. And of course, the Office of Sustainability will be kind of our main point of contact at the city. Next slide. So we're also in the process of kind of a broad planning. A lot of this can fit into stakeholder engagement and emergency planning. But this is kind of an overview of like how we are planning to launch and develop all of the processes and connections and communications plans and strategies that are necessary to stand up this Resilience Hub network. So we're starting out by building a network of these organizations. Having a strong connection in the community is the most important part of this. We could design the most impressive process and technology to do this, but without the community, the strength in the connection in the community, it won't be able to have the impact that we need. So we're focusing a lot of effort in the beginning of building a really strong network of organizations that we'll work with to develop the network and all the processes that are related. We'll also be, as part of this greater project, we already have funding to work with three more of our resilience hubs to develop shovel-ready solar and storage designs, so we can have projects ready to take to funders. We'll be working with engaging residents to define and plan resilience and understand what it means to them in the community, and then coordinating on what existing services are already provided with the community organizations as well as the City of Detroit. And then we will also be looking at emergency services planning. So defining each of the, defining different emergencies and climate emergencies, such as flooding, extreme heat and cold, power outages, and what it is that triggers something to be communicated or distributed throughout the network. So we'll understand what's already happening at each of the different community organizations that are serving as resilience hubs and within the city, and work to connect all of that together into one process so that the city has designated spaces to distribute supplies or services, and as well that services can be shared across the network. And we'll be working on a lot of documentation and planning so that this can be managed and operated going forward. And we'll formally, at the end of all of this planning, we'll formally launch the Resilient Eastside Resilience Hub Network. And so a lot of this is led by Eastside Community Network and with a lot of the partners that we have highlighted already. Next slide, please. So these are 3 of our initial resilience hubs that we are working on right now, that we have solar and battery storage projects already funded and in process. So the Stoudemire Wellness Hub, Ricky already dove into. I also mentioned we'll be working with a Brilliant Detroit house. So Brilliant Detroit revitalizes kind of vacant homes across the city and creates centers for early childhood development and supporting families. And so we're working with their particular Chandler Park house, where they've done a gut rehab of the house, and we're in the process of developing solar and battery storage there. And then on the right side, you can see the Lennox Center is a city recreation facility that is actually being built as a new construction, and we have supported them along the way in developing their building to function off the grid and to be able to operate for 72 hours without power if there's a power outage. So we're also in the process, of solar and battery storage at all of these locations. And then the next slide, please. All right, and then the next step on the solar and battery storage and looking at that really resilient structure side of it is that we have funding from the Kresge Foundation and Clean Energy Group to evaluate 3 more sites for shovel-ready projects. So we'll be working with facility managers to determine the electrical loads and critical load assessments, doing a lot of modeling in that space, and then doing a design of solar and battery storage system so that we will have 3 more projects that are shovel ready and ready to take to funders. And we will, while we only have funding to do this for 3 of our sites right now, we'll also be doing continued engagement with the rest of our Resilience Hub participating organizations to support them in figuring out what needs to be done. If they need to do things to be solar ready, they may need some other structural projects in their buildings. And so we'll be looking forward to raising more funding and building out this capacity across the entire network. And with that, I'll pass it off to Tim, who will be talking about how our Contractor Accelerator kind of ties into the resilience hubs.
Thank you, Liz. This is Tim Skroksky with Elevate, and so part of the vision that the community had, that Eastside Community Network had, that Elevate had, was that we were going to build and train the community to build out the resilience in the community. Part of that is resilience to flooding. Elevate and Eastside Community Network did a rain ready program, which we installed rain gardens and backflow prevention devices in homes to prevent people's homes from flooding. But then more importantly, as we think about this project, we're training a workforce of BIPOC contractors, Detroit-based contractors, or Detroit area-based contractors, also including Highland Park. And Karanja will tell you a little bit about his organization. They're based in Highland Park, which is another disinvested community that actually sits within the boundaries of the city of Detroit. And we want to, leverage, the people power, the skills that Detroiters have, and get them working on this and building the wealth in the community, right? And supporting them with system design, construction, permitting, contracting, networking, and most importantly, just lifting up these existing contractors so that they can get into this industry and create wealth in their community. Next slide, please. So we put together a consortium of partners who were dedicated to this. It all started at Eastside Community Network, and then our partners, our community partners at Brilliant Detroit as well. with Elevate putting together a program. This is a program that Elevate's doing in other communities as well. So we're replicating this. We're doing this in Chicago, Kansas City, Portland. It looks different in each place, but supporting disadvantaged minority contractors is something that Elevate's doing all over the country. You know, we already have or had a strong partnership with Ryter Cooperative Industries. We partnered with them originally on this project with the Lennox Center, that they're already starting to build out solar panels and a battery storage system. And then we also work with some local partners, Dunamis Clean Energy Partners, which is a manufacturer of clean energy products in the city of Detroit, OpConnect, which is actually based out of Portland, Oregon, but we're working with them on an affordable mobility platform in the city of Detroit to install electric vehicle chargers for car sharing programs at affordable multifamily buildings. And then Detroiters Working for Environmental Justice, another grassroots Detroit organization that Elevate is working with, and we have a twin program. It's a Healthy Homes Building, you know, Contractor Accelerator. We're supporting contractors so that they can use and understand the best practices for rehabbing homes in the city of Detroit as well. And then Michigan Energy Efficiency Contractors Association, a great association that gets our contractors and us connected with a lot of the good contractors that are working in the state of Michigan. And then, of course, our contractors that I'm going to introduce you to. So we have a cohort of 5 contractors in our Detroit Clean Energy Contractor Accelerator. And I'm going to introduce you to each one of those coming up here as well. Next slide. So the project workflow, right? So we have a contractor development pathway. You know, we're already well into it, 3/4 into our program. We had contractor applications where we interviewed the contractors, finding the best fit for contractors. Then we have a cohort selection in which we have that consortium of partners that you just saw on that slide. We all came together and introduced the contractors to them to make sure they were the right fit. And then we start out the project with growth plans. So Elevate has a program in which we help these contractors look at all aspects of their business, and we try to identify where they need growth support, and so that we can deliver it. So each time we enter into a next cohort of contractors, we always try to the support we give, we always try to make sure that's the support that contractors need. So it's different for every contractor, and it may be different for every cohort. And some of that support, we're working with the Michigan Minority Contractors Association. They've been a huge support. They're mentoring, they're supporting these contractors with bonding, bidding, certification, competitive landscape, operations plannings, and financing. And so they meet weekly, if not bi-weekly, with the Michigan Minorities Contractors Association so that they can receive the support they can and they can elevate their businesses. And then we're doing technical training. Nate's going to talk about that. Nate just finished up a technical training last week that went really well on solar storage and battery. OpConnect's doing training on electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and making sure that these contractors can get access to the best jobs and the unbelievable amount of funding that's coming down the pipeline from the federal government. Then ultimately, we're gonna see these contractors. They're gonna get technical training from us, but they're also getting a stipend in which they can get additional training. They can get NAPCED certified, which is North American certified energy practitioners in solar installation or solar sales, whichever avenue they want to go into. We're not telling them what they should get certified in. We're supporting them. One of the contractors is actually using it to get his electrician's journeyman's license so that he can be, he can get into the industry. So next slide, please. So here is our cohort number 1. We've been together since the beginning of the year, essentially. Detroit Voltage, based in Detroit. Black woman-owned business for 6 years, focusing on electrical contracting. Currently, right now, their specialty is residential. And they really want to grow from residential to commercial and then get into the EV, solar, and battery storage space. Ryter Cooperative Industries, like I said, we already had an existing relationship with them. Karaja, is going to be speaking next, so he can tell a little bit more about it. They're a solar project management, engineering project management firm, and they're interested, and I should say they're also interested in electric vehicle charging, but their main core business so far has been solar and battery storage. Been around for 7 years. And then Black and Insulation Services. They are a second generation insulation energy efficiency company. And Elevate has been working with them, actually, another Black-owned business for two brothers, actually. And they've been doing a lot of work with our team in Ann Arbor, doing a lot of insulation and helping us with some of the A2Zero, programs that the city of Ann Arbor is doing. They're really focused on reducing the carbon footprint of their housing. And then KMR Construction, another partner that we met through Black Women in Construction Association, which was started by the Michigan Minority Contractors Association, Kimberly Red, and she runs electrical and construction contracting business with her brother. Again, and this is, I believe, another second generation business. She's been around for 18 years and wants to move on from just being an electrical contractor, and get into the EV, solar, and battery storage business. And then Flintstone Construction, which is to date been a general contracting firm, Shocker Mans, running that business. It's only 3 years. It's more of an entrepreneur, and he's an electrical engineer by trade. And he's getting into electrical contracting and has dreams of becoming a top-notch solar developer. Next slide. So again, Detroit Voltage. Dina Neely is the owner, and also electrical contractor. Her previous experience was working in the engineering department in the city of Detroit, and she decided to start her own business, and she's really growing. She actually has an office in Detroit and Houston, and just recently was selected as a Google Small Business. So we're really excited to support Dina and her team and expand their service offerings. Next slide, please. Blanket Insulation Services, again, like I said, it is a second generation business. They're based out of Southfield, which is another close-in Detroit community, and they've been acting as general contractor and generally an energy efficiency firm. And they actually see and hear from their clients that they want to not only do energy efficiency upgrades in their homes, but also add solar. So the goal is to get them prepared and ready to be project managers to offer that service as well. Next slide, please. KMR Construction, like I said, Kimberly Red, electrical contracting firm, and even before she's was in the program, her mission as her company was helping her clients by also helping the planet and building a better future for all. So she's had a vision to get into this, and she really wants to transform a company that the family's been running for 18 years. And really, build something bigger and better for Detroiters. Next slide. And then Flintstone Construction, like I said, Shocker Mans. He previously was at the Great Lakes Water Authority, and actually I connected with him before this project, in which they were looking at how they could solarize, the water treatment plant for the entire region. It was one of his passions at that time. Because of policy and limits on funding, that didn't happen. But now he's gone on his own as an entrepreneur and really excited about getting into the solar industry. Next slide, please. And then Ryter Cooperative Industries. I won't talk too much about it. Karaja Famadou is the COO. His partner Ali Dairul is the CEO. And you know, they came together after Ali had studied in school and wanted to really learn how to decarbonize homes and make net zero homes. And they're really amazing. They've really grown from doing solar and battery storage at urban farms to now doing large commercial projects that Karanjo will tell you more about. Next slide, please. So that's it for the Elevate team. You know, we're really excited to see this first cohort graduate in September of this year. We're going to have our hands-on training courses this summer, and really, you know, lift up these contractors. And our goal is we have continued funding. So as we move into, you know, as the cohort finishes their first phase of it, Elevate, we call it continuous support. We're going to continue to support these 5 contractors in their development so that we are going to help them as they grow with accessing and networking with clients and responding to RFPs to get into the business. At the same time, Elevate has funding to start a second cohort. So we're going to have a second cohort of contractors that we're going to build up as well. We find that just, you know, supporting a team of contractors for 6 to 8 months with really great support doesn't get them all the way into the industry, and they need continuous support, you know, beyond just the initial training. So we're really privileged and thankful that we have the funding that not only can we support them for an extended period of time, but then we can also start a new cohort, you know, going into 2024. Thank you. And I believe Nate will be up next talking about some of the technical support that he's providing originally at the project doing feasibility, and now training some of these contractors that we just talked about.
Thanks, Tim. And just before you start, Nate, I wanted to remind everyone to keep submitting your questions. We will get to them at the end of the presentation. Take it away, Nate. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, and thanks for the introduction. So my name is Nate Mills. I run operations for American Microgrid Solutions, and I'm the lead technical and architecture solutions analyst as well. So let's go straight to the next slide. First, I can give you just a couple of minutes about what American Microgrid Solutions does and why we're even in this conversation. And this is a graphic of the different services that we provide. And the whole point of our existence is to be able to provide all of these services for a purpose, right? So these are the functions, right? Yes, we can figure out which buildings should get a microgrid and which should not. We can tell you like what size should it be to accomplish the facility's values, et cetera, and really take it from start to finish. But the purpose of doing all of this is that American Microgrid Solutions exists in order to bring resilience to places that need it most. And often those places are low and middle income communities that don't have as many resources as other communities. So when there's a disruption, there are not a lot of places to turn. That's exactly the right kind of place for a resilience hub. And in fact, the description of resilience hubs, coining the term, was through Urban Sustainability Directors Network. And the founder of our company was a co-author on literally the book of like what a resilience hub needs to be really effective for the community. And so a lot of the time when we focus on the power side of that, it doesn't mean that we're ignoring the other pillars, and those were the things that were in Elizabeth's presentation. So that's what American Microgrid Solutions does, and I'll focus in a little bit more on one piece of that. If we can go to the next slide. On the graphic of the Eastside Community Network and where these resilience hubs were all going to be, you saw that one of them was the Lennox Center at 8B Ford Park. So this is a tear down of the old center and a rebuild of a new building a little bit farther out of the floodplain by the city of Detroit. In 2020, Clean Energy Group funded us to do a feasibility analysis of this building to figure out, you know, what kind of a power system should we install in order to enable a resilience hub at this community center. That was through the Resilient Power program that you heard about and the Technical Assistance Fund. And so we came up with a design, and that design allowed the project to be essentially shovel ready. right? Because when Elevate went out to get grant funding to actually build this system attached to the new construction building, it's a lot easier to raise those funds if you know what you're going to do, right? If you can say, here's what we're going to build, and here's the amount of resilience we expect to get out of it and give back to the community, then it becomes easier to raise funds. So in that way, doing this analysis early, even though it might be a period of years before it actually gets built, makes it a lot easier to actually implement the project because the funding is easier to get. So the grant was secured by Elevate in 2021. USDN was part of that grant funding, as was the GM Climate Foundation and others. And in 2022, we engaged with actually starting the construction of the building and the construction of the power system along with it. During that time, there was a big change in the building. So the building grew by about 50% electrically. And that was just as a result of the design process and what the architects on the City of Detroit side were doing. And that caused us to redesign our system too, right? So in response to the building changing, the system for the building had to change in order to achieve the same outcomes that the city wanted to have and that Elevate and the rest of the team wanted to provide. So I'll just say that, in these projects, there's often long timelines and a lot to consider in what's in, what's out, and what effect do our decisions have on it. And it's very helpful to have someone be the through line, right? From the beginning of the project and understanding what it was supposed to do in the beginning to the end, because lots of people from the City of Detroit have changed out during that time. And it's very easy to lose the narrative of what was supposed to happen. So it's helpful to have someone keep that in mind. That's one of the things we emphasize in the contractor training, is that you're going to enter into this process at some point along its development, and someone has to be there early enough to carry that through line through the end of the project. And if that can be one of the people in our cohort, that's perfect, right? To have start to finish plus hands-on is ideal. So as of this quarter, the power system installation at Lennox is beginning, and solar panels are going up on roofs, and that's being done by Ryter Cooperative Industries. As you heard, RCI is one of the cohort, and they've also been a very close partner of ours, right? As they build this system, we are essentially their advisor to what they need to watch out for as they're embarking on this very large project. And we expect that the power system installation will be complete at the end of this year. And that'll take me right into the next slide. All this, discussion of Ricky's vision for resilience hubs and how that relates to the USDN funding, and the people in blue on here, you've seen these names before in other people's presentations. So the more of these projects we do, the more you start to realize that it is a community of people, right? Number one, it's a pretty small community, so you see the same names over and over again. But also number two, no one can do this by themselves, right? It takes everybody in the pool to make a resilience hub happen, including the community networks, including the funders, including the technical arm. Everybody's got to play their part, and that's how successful projects come together. Next slide. So specific to the training that we're doing for the cohort, one of the things I really wanted to get across to them was, one, what are the sort of technical details of various parts of the system that you have to think about? But also, now that you know those, how do you pick sizes, right? How do you even decide what the right amount of solar is, or whether you need a generator, or how big a battery, and if it's going outside or inside? These are all things that can fundamentally change the outcomes of the project, and they have to be balanced against what the site actually needs, right? So if you look at this graphic, on the left-hand side, yeah, there are some things that engineers like us like to play with, right? And we turn dials up and down to achieve different goals, but the goals are the thing, right? The outcomes are the thing that is important. And so each site will have some amount of, some different emphasis on savings or sustainability or security, and the balance of those values drives the balance of what we do with the system. So as the site turns dials on the three things on the right, we turn dials of the three things on the left to make sure that the system is balanced. And in the end, the most important thing we can do is make sure that the system we're designing is balanced with this, or is appropriate to what the site actually expects to get. And And if you do those two things independently and just get, you know, an optimal system from an economic standpoint, that may not be what they actually want, and it may not make as much of a difference in the community as it could. So that's when you're doing a feasibility analysis, it's partly, yes, this technical part to get shovel ready, but it's also an understanding part on the side of the site so that they can get what the system is, what it is not, and have an appropriate expectation of what they're going to get when this whole thing is over. So that's really the first big step after you find the place that needs it, is to do the feasibility analysis, get your initial sizing, get the concept of operation, and really define what the system is. And then you can go on to all the other technical details of getting through drawings and permitting and everything else. So this was a big part of our training last week, and there are lots more details that follow. But if you do this part right, then at least you have a foundation for what the system will and will not be, and you can make decisions based on that. So I will stop there, and I'm going to kick it over to Karanja, and I'm happy to take any questions that you want to talk about on Linux or any of our other projects. Thanks.
Hi, Karanja, we'll pass it off to you. Just a heads up, I don't know if you know you're still on mute and your camera's off, so we can't hear you.
Minor details. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm Karanja Pamadou, and as mentioned earlier, I'm with Ryter Cooperative Industries. And I want to first express our deepest appreciations, RCI's appreciation to our partners at Elevate and American Microgrid Solutions for choosing RCI as the lead microgrid installer for the Linux projects, which we're working on, and inviting us to be members and mentors of the Detroit Clean Energy Contractor Accelerator program. We are very excited and very pleased to be a part of that. This membership and being a part of this has been very valuable experience to us at RCI as we position the company to help meet the increasing call for microgrid and resiliency solutions across the landscape. So again, many thanks to Tim Strotsky at Elevate and his team, and as well for their trust and confidence in RCI and the ability to get the work done, as well as many thanks also to Nate from American Microgrid Systems, who has unselfishly lent his expertise, technical knowledge, and expertise at an advisory capacity as well. Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate it. So RCI, as mentioned earlier, is an organization located in the city of Highland Park. We are community focused, and our goal is to bring clean energy to the community. We are focused on commercial solar installations, workforce development. We are also project managers, engineering, and looking to expand our business and service offerings into microgrid development installations, which is part of what we are seeing now. The next slide, please. You can pass that up as well. Okay, so as indicated, we are lead microgrid installers, and the microgrid solution that has been selected is a hybrid solution that's composed of solar, storage, and generator. Next slide, please. So what I want to do today is give you a high-level overview of some of the activities that RCI has been involved in as part of the implementation of this project, to kind of give a little more scope or perspective to and bones meat to what Nate previously mentioned. So I want to take a look here at these are the phases basically on the left-hand side of this of the slide. So Nate mentioned the launch and the development kinds of activities. Then we go into contracting. Then we go into the design phase, the procurement phase, and installation phase. So what I want to do today is give you a high level sense of the kinds of activities that we've been involved in, from contracting through installation. So as was mentioned, we began the project in in first quarter, basically, of 2022, and we, as Nate mentioned, are still working on that. This slide indicates through the first quarter here, and of course we continue to work on this, and as mentioned, anticipated completion being by the end of the year. Next slide, please. So moving into the design phase. The design phase is a multi-level iterative process with the ultimate goal of developing the solution such that it fits within the requirements of the client, as well as fits within the cost structure, the budget structure that has been set out by the client. Again, echoing the kinds of things that Nate mentioned. So in the design phase, we take a look at finalizing designs, looking at interconnection and permit applications. So the drawing that you see here was kind of alluded to in Nate's presentation. This is evidence of our finalized design for the Linux project. Here you see laid out here. I'm not sure if you can, hopefully you can see it anyway. On the left side, the format of this engineering drawing. On the left side, we see basically the solar portion laid out, the panels, and how the conductors are connected through the junction box and through our various disconnects, AC disconnect, DC disconnects, etc. So that would be the left side of the diagram into the bottom portion of the diagram. And then at the top portion of the diagram, just below the writing, you'll see where we depicted the layout of the storage system. So that includes the battery itself, the inverter for the battery, as well as transformers. And then towards the center of the diagram, the drawing, you'll see we have the location for the generator, for a backup generator that's part of the system. And then a major component here as well will be the ATS system. And then the remainder of the drawing is composed at the very top, composed of technical data, such as conductor scheduling, conduit scheduling, calculations that are required to be compliant with National Electric Code and etc. And as well some of the call-outs, in fact, that specifically identify the components that are depicted here. And in the lower right-hand corner, you see all of the inputs feeding into the panels that are the power sources for the project, for the building, as well as some other annotations. One of the requirements, one of the requests from the city was that we provide or that load shedding be a part of the solution. So that kind of is depicted there. So I forgot to mention that from the design perspective, I'm just going to narrowly focus on the electrical piece, which this is evidence here, the drawing, and then placement. The second part will be placement of the components. So next slide, please, which I'll focus on the placement considerations. So as Nate mentioned, there are multiple considerations that are a part of a project. So moving now to looking at where to place the components for the solution. So here we have, as I mentioned, it's a hybrid solution. So we need to have a place for all of the power electronics that are associated with generating the power, as well as, in our case, where we're going to place the storage, what will be the storage location, as well as storage being battery. And then next slide, what will be the location for our generator. So next slide there, please. So again, where do we put these kinds of, where do we put these components, the placement of these components? Well, in our design discussions, it was determined that initially our intent was to place all of our power electronics in the mechanical room of the facility. But it turns out that the number of components that we have as part of our design solution were too great to fit comfortably into the mechanical room. So we had to determine what was our solution from there. So we put our heads together and decided that, well, okay, let's pull this all out and co-locate it at some location on the site. So we made that decision, and our first approach was to think about putting it on a slab, a single slab, some other location at the site. So we had a conversation with the architects. The next slide, please. We had a conversation with the architects on the project, and they suggested and identified a site on the location, on the site, which is in the upper left-hand corner of this diagram, where you see a rectangle. I don't have control of my cursor. My intent was to be able to circle that for you, but you see in red, the red rectangle highlighted. So that was the location we decided to go with, and that location is about 300 feet from the facility. So what we had to do then is decide how exactly we want to make that happen. We again had some further conversations to consider what it is we wanted to do. We decided that having a single slab to house the battery, the generator, and all of our power electronic equipment was going to be too expensive. And we decided that what we will do from a cost-saving perspective is to break that into two separate pads, although it kind of appears so in this case, but two separate pads, and in between those pads, we would place our ground-mounted electric, power electric components. So what we have is one pad that is dedicated to housing the generator, one pad that is dedicated to housing the battery and storage, and in the middle of those, which we'll see momentarily, is where we place a rack that we can mount all of our power electronic equipment to. The next slide, please. So following the finalization of our design, we move into the procurement phase. So the procurement phase is roughly focused on supply chain management. So we do a little deeper dive here for you into basically the bill of materials for the project. As was mentioned, it is a 70 kilowatt project. So we decided to go with 450 watt PV panels. We have about 150 of those that'll be placed on the roof of the Linux Center. We also are including an ASCO automatic transfer switch as part of our design. A note here regarding timelines and what can happen to timelines as a result of factors that we are not able to manage ourselves. For example, here, the automatic transfer switch, the delivery of that, the lead time for the delivery of that was 6 months. So that obviously had to be factored into what our ultimate timeline looked like. So we will see this in another situation as well as part of our bill of materials. But given where we're at today in the supply chain, man, it can really have an impact on your project timeline. The next slide, please. Continuing to take a look at the bill of materials at a high level here, the battery in this case, as again was mentioned earlier, is 125 kilowatt battery, the 220 kilowatt hour capacity. It's a lithium-ion battery, and is integrated. The microgrid controller for the project is integrated into this battery configuration. And again, the next piece here to the right is depicted the 150 kilowatt natural gas generator. And again, here is a situation where we're impacted by the long lead times in this case. a 1-year lead time just to get the backup generator. Next slide, please. Just a continuation of a look at the major components. We've already taken a look at the overall project. Project is 20 kilowatts. The solar panels, the battery, the microcontroller, and the natural gas generator. Next slide. And rounding out largely the bill of materials, some of the items not mentioned previously. We're using Iron Ridge racking and ballast systems, and we're using 2 43 kilowatt solar edge 3-phase commercial inverters, as well as some of the other components that you see here. So that is a part of the supply chain management and supply chain activities that we're involved in, and managing those relationships, placing orders, adjusting timelines, etc. The next slide, please. Moving into the installation phase. In the installation phase, of course, the focus is completing the installation and ultimately commissioning, testing, and getting the interconnection and permit approvals, and finally the punch list. So here's a visual here of the location on the site where we decided to collocate all the components of the project. So the left image, of course, is the before, and the right side image is the beginning after. So you see that our team is beginning to install the vertical supports for, in this case, the vertical supports for the rack mounted components. Next slide, please. Here's just another image of the progression of the rack where we're installing all of our power electronics, and that continues to be built out. We have an inverter in place on both the right and left and right side images, as well as some of the other components that make up the total microgrid package. Next slide, please. Here's another illustration, another image of what was involved in the project. Obviously, we need to have the ability to transfer all of the power between the components and the building itself. We need to get those capabilities to the building. So here on the left side image, we see again the rack in place, and we see the trenching here. Largely what I want to focus on here is the amount of trenching that was involved. The trenching covered an area, of course, of about 300 feet. And here is all of the conduit that was bundled into that trench. Conduit for both our project, our microgrid solution, as well as conduit that supports the remainder of the electrical contractors' activities. And the image on the right side shows where the conduit for our portion, our microgrid portion of the project, terminates. You see that there are 4 conduits that are a part of our solution here on the project. The next slide, please. Here are just some final images that I have of going into the. I didn't mention that the conduits from the outside that you saw were going into the mechanical room. So we see the 4 conduits there. We have two 2.5-inch conduits. I'm looking at the right side, not focusing on the right side, the right image. So we got 2 2.5-inch conduits, 1.5-inch conduit, and that's for communication. And then we have a 1-inch conduit for the annunciator for the generator, a remote annunciator for the generator on the project. And on the left-hand image, you see in the upper corner, upper mid-section of that image, you see the location through which the conductors from the rooftop solar installation are going to be coming into the mechanical room, then combined with all the other conductors to make the completion of our microgrid. Again, a microgrid that will be a robust microgrid that provides the kind of resilience that was requested by the customer. And as Nate mentioned, depicts the balance or is representative of the balance that had to be struck between the kinds of components, the capacity of the components, the compliance of the components with national standards, and the budget that has been set forth by the customer. So that's essentially it. That's a look at the kinds of activities that we're involved in on site at the Lennox Center. We're again very excited to be a part of this project and moving it forward to completion. Thank you much. That's it.
Great, thank you so much. At this point, I'll ask if everyone wouldn't mind, all of our panelists would mind turning on their cameras. We have about 15 minutes for Q&A. We have a lot of questions, so if I don't get through everything, I do encourage you to reach out via email and I can connect you with whoever our panelists most appropriate would be to address your questions. Okay, so first question is for Elizabeth and or Ricky. How did the network form in terms of actually selecting facilities? Was there like a process where people applied and you picked from there which facilities were going to be included in this, the first 3 cohort and then the next 3?
I think that's probably on me. ECN's, like what we've been doing for a long time is partnering with block clubs, neighborhood groups. So we've kind of had a network of people that we were already connected with that are working on these things. We're still sort of processing through who's going to be the next phase in terms of the solar+storage feasibility studies. So we're kind of, right now, Elizabeth and I and Megan are working on sort of developing that criteria so we can do it. But it's how we're kind of basing it in thought right now is around like who's sort of ready for that on their building, because some of the places that we're working with, they might not have their roof quite ready to take solar or sort of factors like that. But so it's kind of like readiness and where people are at in sort of the formation of their resilience hubs. I don't know if you have anything to add, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I would also add, we're also thinking about like need for the support. So some of the organizations are bigger organizations that are really great at fundraising, and they, what will support them in the process, they may be able to do some of the fundraising for those projects on their own. So we're also considering, how much need for our technical expertise and fundraising support do they need.
Great, thank you. A couple clarification questions around the difference between Elevate's role and AMS's role. AMS, are you like a mentor through the Elevate program? Are there other AMS type mentors through the Elevate program? What's the difference in roles there?
So sure, I can answer from my perspective, Tim. So yeah, so we work for Elevate formally, right? So we are Elevate's technical advisor, and they point us towards the places that need help, right? So that's how we got involved with Lennox. That's how we got involved with the Contractor Accelerator training. And we bring a lot of engineering expertise and sort of holistic development expertise to the project because oftentimes they need a sort of a little bit of like a coherent look at the entire thing, including the mentoring that the firms like RCI might need in order to get through the project successfully. So that's where we fit in.
Yeah, and I just add that, Elevate and AMS have a history of working together, right? So AMS has been a technical, expert partner for Elevate for at least 5 years, probably longer, on a various amount of projects. So we've leaned on them to be the national experts in microgrids, energy, storage, and so that just enhances our ability to, support communities adopting this technology.
And I guess I can add one more thing on the relationship between all the people that are in the pool. It's really important to have partners that you can work with, right? Because these projects are not easy, and we've had several setbacks and difficult conversations about how we would actually build Linux and what it needed to be and who was going to do what. So it's really important to have trust and respect between the people that are playing in the pool together.
If I might just chime in, very valuable. Nate and American Microgrids have been a very valuable resource for us on the project. And we certainly appreciate the support.
You know, and then the goal of our Detroit Clean Energy Contractor Accelerator is to have our CI's team who's absorbing this valuable support. Now they will become supporters of other contractors in that program, right? So Karanja now is the expert. Now Karanja, you know, can partner with Detroit Voltage or, you know, with one of our other contractors, for example, right, and provide that, right? You know what I mean? I mean, there's plenty of work to do, right? We've got a ton of opportunity and need.
Yeah, and you know, our perspective on that is like, we know that if we train Karanja enough, then they're going to outgrow us, right? At some point, like, they won't need our help anymore, and they'll just go do their own thing, which is kind of the point, right? There's so many projects that need to be done. We can't do them all. There's no reason to be greedy. So this is like, there's an abundance of work. Let's just get everybody to be able to do it. That's the goal.
Great, super helpful. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Karanja.
Just going to say that we look forward to those opportunities to mentor.
Yeah, you all just answered a bunch of questions within one, because we were going to ask about future. I was going to ask about future mentorship. So thank you for touching upon that. Some questions came in just regarding how the program's structured. Is the benefit that there's no cost training, or do contractors and their teams who are part of the accelerator, like a Ryter, get actually paid for their participation? How does that work?
They don't get paid for participation, but we try to provide as much support as possible. So, you know, in essence, they are getting, you know, access to funding, and then they get to choose how to spend it, right? So we're not necessarily paying for their time, but they get a pool of funding, and then they get to figure out how they want to spend it. If they want to go to a conference, they will spend that so they can learn something at a conference. If they want a training, they can spend it on a training. If they need a contracting license, they can spend it on a contracting license, and there's, you know, a whole list of things that the way they can use the money and the support.
Great. And then kind of a separate tranche of questions really pertain to the ownership structures of the actual hubs. So I think the first would be for you, Elizabeth and Ricky, in terms of, are all of the hubs that you're working on, both the 3 current ones and this next 3, are they anticipated that you're expecting full grant support, or are there financing options available? How do you just anticipate you'll keep getting full grant support for all these projects?
Do you want me to start, or do you want to start, Ricky?
You can start.
Okay. So in terms of the ownership structures, I mean, we're open to exploring different ownership structures. Most of the organizations we're working with are CDCs or nonprofits. So the goal would be to continue supporting them to get grant funding. However, there are other opportunities for funding. We have a green bank here in Michigan called Michigan Saves that does financing for energy solutions, and could potentially kind of loop roofs into that. So that's something to consider too, of if financing is needed for other improvements, there could be a way to kind of pair them. However, I think the goal is to go after grant support when we can for most organizations. Ricky, anything else?
No, I think that hits it, and it kind of goes back to what you said earlier too. It's like level setting to see like where organizations at, who needs the most support, and sort of prioritizing those who are least likely to be able to kind of do this on their own, and you know, like helping them through even applying for their own grants. But yeah, I think, you know, that what we're trying to do is maximize the benefits they receive from the solar plus storage, right? So it's not just having that energy resilience, but also being able to save on their electricity bills, because a lot of organizations are struggling just to maintain. So it's like anything we can do to sort of take burdens off of them. So that's the ideal, but you know, we're pursuing any and all potentials for funding.
And I'll add, because this is one of my roles at Elevate, is you know, if and when an affordable housing, you know, one of these nonprofit community members has affordable housing, there's an opportunity maybe to put that into the financing for the affordable housing, right? There's a real opportunity there. We're actually supporting one, not in Detroit, but in Kalamazoo right now on a solar+storage kind of net zero project there. And those certainly, you know, having community rooms and community spaces at affordable housing is a great place to make a resilience hub as well.
Great.
Yeah,
So,
that was.
oh, sure. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Oh, I would also add, I guess we didn't mention, we are looking forward to the funding that will be coming through the IRA. I think that will also be able to make that to be a part of a little bit larger of a portion of the funding that can be covered. And so that can allow us to ask for smaller amounts of the projects to be covered by grants.
Great. And just along those lines, are the systems being sized? I don't know if this would be for Nate or Karanja, but are the systems for these facilities being sized based on what would best support the facility, or being sized based on like a pre-existing budget of grants that you think are available?
It definitely depends on both. There are always constraints put on us by the facility, either as a floor of like, if you do any less than this, it's really not worth it at all. And then a maximum based on size constraints and electrical connections that are available. But budget certainly plays a role. It absolutely did at Lennox because the grant that Elevate secured was appropriate to the size the building was, and when the building grew, then we had to make some difficult decisions and have some conversations with the city about that. So it's always both, and those are just a couple of the factors that play.
Great.
We started out, I'm sorry, we started out, for example, with the backup generator that was, I believe, about 80 kW. And we were able to make the change and upgrade that to 150 kW. And likewise with the battery, the capacity there was initially going to be 110 kilowatt hours, but we were able to make the adjustment and bump it up to 220 kilowatt hours. So again, that balance, as Nate mentioned.
Speaking of backup generators, there were a couple questions just clarifying. Are all the facilities going to have hybrid systems that include fossil fuel generators? And if so, is that a preference of the organization or a requirement of like the Detroit program?
I think it's not a requirement, but the hybrid can be just a combination of solar plus storage. We want to have a more robust resiliency. Then you can go with you can have the added generator. And typically, well, I'd say my experience has been, of course, with generators. Nate, I'm sure knows some other configurations that are out there as well that may not rely on generators as a third leg. Wind, of course, would be perhaps one, but I'm not.
And a good example of the tension would be, if a facility is very focused on sustainability and presenting, like the face to the public is all about sustainability, so it's just solar and storage, that is going to conflict with maybe resilience goals. Right? If your goal is to have no less than 72 hours of backup power, that's difficult to achieve with just solar and a battery unless your solar is very much oversized. And sometimes that's not allowed by the utility. So you start to bump up against all the boundaries here. And that's where having a facility that's really engaged and really interested in getting to an answer is helpful, because when you come back and say, well, okay, but here's your budget, and if you want to do it just with solar and storage, here's what it looks like. If you will allow a generator, even a small one, here's what it looks like, right? That might be cheaper, but it also might be dirtier and louder. So where do we want to set this balance?
And let's be real, the facts, Detroit has some of the most unreliable electricity in the whole nation. And they have power outages the last 7 to 8 days, right? Solar and storage is not going to get you there, right? So the design at Lennox Center is designed that potentially they could run it for 7 days, if that's what the community needs, right? And that's what the community would need, especially in a winter month, the winter months, right? You know what I mean? You want a warm place, a safe place, hopefully going to provide that. So, and then there's a smaller resilience hub, the Burn Detroit House. That's certainly going to be just solar and storage. We're hopeful that because it's such a smaller site, the battery storage can kind of last a little bit longer at that facility. At ECN, I don't know if we've come to a final conclusion there, right, Ricky? Right, we're still that one is still under some design considerations. So.
Well, we're at the end, but I think the appropriate question to finish out with for this is lots of questions about, is this accelerator program only available in Michigan? Will it be available elsewhere? And how do contractors get involved?
So the unique, kind of clean energy with solar, EV, battery storage, that kind of design is generally only available in Detroit, but we have a Contractor Accelerator in Chicago that's doing solar work. We have a Contractor Accelerator in Kansas City that's focusing on air source heat pumps, and similarly we have a Contractor Accelerator in Portland, Oregon that's concentrating on air source heat pumps. But the goal is to take these existing accelerators, which we've kind of replicated different places, just the technical training's different, is to add solar and battery storage to these other ones and add air source heat pumps to Detroit as well, right? But we're kind of in a startup phase, large scale startup phase, but startup phase of developing these contractor accelerators, multiple regions. So, but yeah, you can get in contact. There's a great website. I could probably share it in the link, or if any folks want information, if you go to Elevate's website and go to our workforce, there's a page where you can actually put in information, get more information. Probably pull that up, or I can share that.
I'd like to thank our panelists. This has been awesome. I apologize if we didn't get to your comment, but like I said, just shoot me an email. And I think, I don't know if we throw up the contact information. There we go, the contact info. You can shoot me an email and I'll make sure you get into contact with a member of the team that can answer your question. But thank you everyone so much. This was a great webinar, and we'll make sure that you all get a PDF copy of the slides, as well as a webinar recording will be sent out within 48 hours. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and a special thanks to our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.